Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude Beyond Mystic, and welcome to today's Beyond the Vault edition. With me, of course, is the one and only Andy Scheckman. You can find his work at milesfranklin.com. Andy, welcome back to the show. How are you, man?
AC, sorry, it's my fault, everybody. I was late today. I apologize. Thanks for bearing with me, my man. It's good to see you again. I hope you're doing well.
Dude, I'm doing excellent. Thank you for being on, and don't you worry about it. We enjoy having all of these conversations with you, and we very much appreciate the time you spend here providing all of this in-depth information for free to our audience members. So, of course,
pleasure is mine, man. It's my honor.
And plus, it's a Mercury retrograde, so don't worry a bit. So
that's what it is. That was the problem. I was going to bring that up, but I'm glad you did.
I know, like,
yeah, what you said.
I've been following your astrology channel, and dude, you're rocking it. Like,
thank you. Oh gosh, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We're triple casting today on Rumble, X, and on Twitter. We want to get into this shift of times, so to speak, here with this announcement by Donald Trump about the 100% tariffs on the BRICS nations, where that could be leading us. Some people are suggesting that that's going to backfire, perhaps on the United States. So we're going to try to decode all of that with you today, and we're also going to make a case for gold and silver. Imagine that here. A lot of researchers are suggesting that now that Bitcoin hit $100,000 yesterday, we could be inching closer here to a dollar demise and a lot more of a bull run type of scenario for our precious metals. So welcome and thank you for being here, everyone. Andy, let's start with that. The big announcement a couple of days ago that apparently nobody saw coming was this idea that Trump would be enforcing 100% tariffs on the BRICS nation. Now, at first glance, you're like, okay, make America first again makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, the tactic that is being proposed here seems to not understand, at least for this part, why the BRICS have been putting all of this infrastructure for maybe a decade now in the first place, and whether or not this threat is actually going to work. What say you? Why is this tariff being imposed right now, or threatened to be imposed right now? And where do you think the BRICS, and how do you think the BRICS are going to respond to this?
Well, first of all, let me say that in my mind, tariffs are not a bad thing if implemented the right way.
Right.
Tariffs were traditionally used to defend a nation's manufacturing base. Problem is, we don't have much of a manufacturing base any longer. So who are we really defending, or what are we really defending? And we're really not. It's masked as a sanction. It's financial warfare. And this is what really pisses off the BRICS nations. I think the BRICS nations would understand tariffs. And if we were to, as an example, as Trump says, to eliminate potentially the income tax and replace it with thoughtful tariffs, not punitive tariffs, if you do, then we will do. Well, that's not a tariff. That's a sanction. That's a threat.
Right.
And I think that's where it could potentially lead to backfiring. You can't make someone take your currency, especially a currency that's at 125% debt to GDP, that was creating $1 trillion worth of debt every 100 days. Now it's down to every 83 days. A system where the back end of the bond market, the rates are moving higher, making the bond prices worth less. And the bond market is very unstable. And I think that ultimately bond prices go lower, interest rates go higher. The dollar continues an inflationary pattern. What Trump is advocating for, lower interest rates, a weaker dollar, lower taxes, tariffs, these are all very inflationary. And I think by forcing countries to not represent their own monetary interest, but to have to take a dollar that is being as grossly mismanaged as ours is and call it a tariff when actually it is more of the same sanctioning and threats, is overplaying his hand. I mean, this is the guy that wrote the book on the art of the deal, so maybe he's just starting from a place way up here and will negotiate down, but I don't like it. I think it's not the message we want to send to the rest of the world after 4 years of doing more to destroy this country's reputation than any external foe could have ever done. I think we should be approaching things a little bit differently. I think, honestly, it will crystallize the resolve of the BRICS nations. And
well, that's the fear that a lot of analysts are suggesting here today. If they were emboldened to get out from underneath these sanctions in the last couple of years, to spend so much time, energy, and effort in this parallel infrastructure, this announcement only justifies why they've put so much energy into it, that they don't want to be part of this system anymore. I have a quote here from Golden Telegraph. Russia says Trump's threat to BRICS nations against replacing the US dollar will backfire. It begins. This was on December 2nd here, just as the news was breaking out. Future Forecasting Group put this out also just afterwards. Hey, now the US dollar, the Aussie dollar is crashing here. Is the US next? The global currency dominoes are lining up. Is this a race to the end? As you just mentioned, the art of the deal for Mr. Trump. Like, there's some people out there that came on my show and they think Trump is stupid for making this announcement. I never thought of Trump as stupid. I actually think of him as a brilliant guy. But that said, this negotiation tactic appears to be stupid. So my question is, what is he really after? Is he doing just what you said? Hey, let's start up here to see if we can negotiate down there as a strong arm kind of tactic opening statement? Or is he really leading us into recognizing that maybe the dollar is dead? It was dead in 2008. We haven't had the funeral yet. And this currency war that's about to play out maybe accelerates that so that we can get to plan B, which is what your guests, Jim Sinclair and Bill Holter, were saying for a number of years, that we would have 3 resets. So is Trump kind of pushing towards this real reset here by doing this negotiation tactic? Again, just a conversation, an adult conversation. We're trying to figure this out, Andy.
I've thought about that myself, JC. I mean, is he trying to usher in a systemic reset? Right. And he could be. I mean, look, this is a guy that understands bankruptcy, understands restructuring, understands balance sheets. We have a balance sheet that is past the point of repair, in essence, unless you make the really difficult decisions. I mean, if you just take Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and and military, I mean, you could cut everything else. Everything else, you cut it. It ain't going to matter, because that's where all the money is going. And that still doesn't address the interest on the debt. That doesn't even take an inch off the debt. None of it. And the debt is the issue. The debt is growing at a level, especially as rates move higher, that is impossible to get away from. And the Congressional Budget Office says, look, by 2031, all of the income tax that we take in will go just to pay the interest on the debt and mandatory entitlement, like Social Security, like Medicare. But military spending, which he wants to spend an awful lot on, is discretional. That means you'd have to borrow that money to fund your military. That doesn't work so well. In essence, we're borrowing money just to pay the interest on the debt that is already there, and you're not chipping away at the debt whatsoever. The only way that it would work would be to send us into a depression, and that would be to drastically slash everything, including Social Security, including Medicare, including veterans benefits, and including military pensions, including all of these entitlements that people rely on. And short of that, everything they do, let's say that Vivek and Elon are able to cut $2 trillion off the debt. So he comes into office with a $36.5 trillion debt. You cut $2 trillion off the deficit. You still have at least $1 trillion in deficit spending, because their deficits are $3-4 trillion. So cut 3 off of it. You still have $1 trillion deficit. So you leave office with a $41.5 trillion debt. You haven't even began to slash it. And at some point, this becomes a big problem. And that some point is coming sooner than later, where the interest on the debt will encompass the majority, if not all, of the income tax. When you add into it the mandatory spending for Social Security and Medicare, you're in trouble. And so maybe he understands this, because he's already said he's not going to touch those areas. He's not going to touch those things. Look, for me, JC, the reason to be euphoric is that we've lived in bizarro world for the last 4 years, and we want our culture back. We want a system based on merit, not on lifestyle. We don't want lawlessness in the cities. We want election integrity. I did an interview earlier this morning, and the idea behind the interview was that Trump is pushing us into, and it was with Francis Hunt, that he's pushing us into a digital world, into a a digital surveillance world. And I said, whoa, wait a second. And I said, you mean to tell me that there are people pulling the strings above Trump? He said, absolutely. And those people you'll never see their face. You'll never know who they are. But they are trying to move us into a tokenized surveillance world where everything is tokenized. Everything from the receipt that you're normally given when you go to a store, that'll be on the ledger, to everything that you own. They want to be able to know what you own, how much you make, where you are at all times, and that this is an agenda, and that
you think Trump is beholden to some of these?
Well, that's
actors?
what he was saying, and I had a hard time believing it. And he said, and the next thing that you'll see happen, he says, is they'll roll out the digital ID. Now, if you look at the digital ID, Bill Gates has a gazillion patents with the digital ID and its integration with your medical records and your bank records. He had those patents 4 years ago, and that they'll roll out the digital ID in the name of election integrity. You can't allow this to happen ever again. And people will take it. And that the whole idea of the Trump administration is to digitize and roll in this surveillance state. Now, is that believable? I'm not sure. He was pretty convincing. All I can say.
Your guest is in good company. I mean, Catherine Austin Fitts here on the screen is also warning about central bank digital currency, it not being a currency, but rather being a controlled grid. You can find that on her website. She also put this out on the Solari report the other day. Is Trump implementing a private CBDC? So there seems to be people behind the scenes looking at all the digital footprints here to at least suggest that maybe this is the route they're going in the back end, and we need to have these conversations and be vigilant, because if we don't want this, we have to be vocal about it and vote with our wallets, so to speak, moving forward. Now, let me bring another piece of the puzzle into the mix here. You and I have talked about Judy Shelton in the past, and I
have her coming on my show next week.
Oh, that's going to be interesting. Guys, if you want to see that interview, go check it out here. You can find Andy, Little by Little is the podcast channel here. You can find it at Miles Franklin on YouTube. Now, lay down some track a little bit for that. First of all, who's Judy Shelton? Why is she important in all this? And what perhaps is she indicating in terms of the Trump movement here to bring gold back somewhere into the mix here as we move forward in this financial reset? Andy?
Yeah, it's both Judy Shelton and Scott Bessent. Scott Bessent, being the new Treasury Secretary, his largest holding is gold, and he openly admits that. And Judy Shelton was an advisor to the last Trump administration, and many think will be nominated to one of the Fed governor boards very soon. And she is an advocate of the gold standard. She is a gold bug. She will tell you that no matter what people say, that we went 175 years on a gold standard with not one drop of inflation and the greatest prosperity the world has ever seen. Now, she's not advocating outright for that as much as she is saying that who in their right mind would buy a treasury from this country when we've chosen, as all governments do, inflation over austerity. And not to mention the volatility in the 10-year treasury, where it's supposed to be stable. It fell by 40% or whatnot last year. So she says, let's issue a treasury that has less of a coupon rate, but is redeemable in gold to inspire demand and transparency and confidence for the U.S. Treasury system. She is someone who understands sound money. She would be certainly a great gold advocate to have at the Federal Reserve. You put her on the Federal Reserve governor list, you put Scott Bessent as the head of the Treasury, we're moving in that direction. So maybe the idea is to force some sort of a systemic reset. Rates go much higher, the banks collapse, bringing down with it much of the internal system. And then Trump is there in an orderly manner to usher in a new system, pegged to gold, maybe a digital currency, as Catherine is saying, a digital CBDC, but pegged to gold. What I've been saying all along, it's the only way to inspire confidence. Maybe. I mean, look, I think there's a fine line between conspiracy and reality these days, but Occam's razor would say that's a pretty darn logical conclusion based upon his actions, based upon his people that he's appointing to advisory boards and to positions, and to what would be the only way out of this if we're at a place where Either we blow up the system by tightening so much and raising rates so much that the whole thing resets, or we choose massive inflation, which leads to higher rates down the road anyway. The whole thing
We're
resets.
between a rock and a hard place. I'm
Right.
totally with you on this here. Now, if the appointments are leading us towards this mechanism of reintroducing gold into the system, that could be encouraging. But at the same time, it seems to be right now, because of the environment, creating some problems. If you look at, you and I talked about this after the BRICS meeting, Russia, I think it was October 22nd or 24, was saying that they were proposing to put the COMEX and the LME out of the market rigging business. Now, this was for more commodities, but they were including in there gold and silver into the mix. So if the Trump administration is going to be putting gold back into the system, and they don't control the price mechanisms, which is what is being suggested here by Russia and perhaps some other actors in the BRICS, that puts them in a vulnerable position to bring stability to the system. One. Two, we're seeing Missouri now proposing to ban central bank digital currencies and recognizing gold and silver as legal tender. So that was interesting. And three, okay, this one threw me for a loop. Not only is gold and silver legal tender in Texas, they're now proposing a gold and silver currency, I guess, to compete worldwide and perhaps also with the Federal Reserve note. So we're not in an environment post-World War II where all the players are on the same page as how to move forward. We have a lot of stragglers and a lot of systems that are competing in parallel here with this administration. This brings a lot of complexity moving forward. What do you make of that here? All of these challenges to perhaps bringing gold back into the system and not having full control here moving forward. Eddie?
But that is a digital currency that they're talking about, redeemable in gold and silver. And, you know, I think that you look at like the head of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, says.
But the point is that the state was introducing their own, presumably in competition
Correct.
with whatever the Feds wanted to do. My point is still the same.
Well, I think that's how they would roll it out if they wanted to roll out a CBDC, but they'd say, no, it's tied to gold and silver. Now, it may not be redeemable in it. I don't know how that will happen. I don't know how you will get people, states that will push back against it and maybe issue their own sovereign money. And the law says that no state can issue any currency other than gold and silver, which is called species. And that's why you see 11 states that have passed those legal tender laws. Look, the bottom line is simply this. I do believe we are moving towards a tokenized digital system. Whether we like it or not, there will be pushback. But even the state like Texas, they're talking of issuing a digital currency redeemable in gold and silver. Now, I think the kicker with the federal side of things is it would be very difficult to make it redeemable in gold and silver. Maybe they have a way of doing it, tying it to the treasury market. I'm not sure. But I do think ultimately that is the plan. That is where they want to go, and to issue a currency that will have any confidence in its global footprint. It will have to be backed by something. It has to be.
Do you want to take a guess as to percentage?
40% easy. I mean, it's 40.
Well, it should be that, but are they going to lead with the 40%? Maybe is the question. Again, Jim Sinclair was suggesting that they would lead with an offer. It would be rejected. We'd go to a second offer, rejected, and then a third reset. I just spoke with Clefai yesterday, and he's seeing the same thing here. He's seeing 3 imminent resets here, or rejections of the offers moving forward for the financial system in the next couple of months, leading into perhaps a whole upending of our financial system that would now be based on 0-point technology as opposed to petroleum or gold or whatever else these guys are thinking about right now. So we're at that critical time. So you say 40%, are they going to lead with that? Is that what they need to lead to? Because the BRICS had suggested with the unit that they would also look at 40%. Is that where you're looking at?
Well, and the Swiss used 40%, and they were gold backed forever. They were the last one to leave the party, but they were 40% gold backed. The US dollar used to be backed by gold 1-to-1 and redeemable. And de Gaulle from France proved that convertible currencies convert. That's a problem.
Right.
For the masses, you look at the unit currency, the way that it was designed, it was redeemable, but it was not tradable for you and I. It was tradable for governments and central banks and commercial banks. But indeed, that redeemability is what gives it authenticity. So I would think 40% would be a number, and it would be revalued at a much higher level. Now, you know, I did an interview with Tom Luongo, and he says, look, you know, they're not going to stop gold's rise. They will let it stair step higher and higher and higher and higher, because it will reliquify the balance sheet of the Fed. that flies in the face a little bit of some people who are calling for immediate revaluation. The head of the Dutch National Bank,
Right.
Cynthia Loomis, the senator from Wyoming, talks about revaluing gold. It is held on the balance sheet in an account called the gold revaluation account.
Right.
Any way you look at it, I don't see a way. I mean, you can talk about Bitcoin for a moment. I mean, Bitcoin is too volatile to back a currency, but what Bitcoin is backing right now in many respects is the treasury market. People don't understand that, but you know, you look at Tether, they were being investigated hard, and they were all over them. The feds were all over them, and then all of a sudden they change what they're backing, like holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and instead they're 85% U.S. Treasuries, and then all of a sudden the heat's off them. You look at USDC, another dollar stablecoin, it's 85% backed in treasuries. So as much of the world is shedding treasuries and looking to gold as an alternative, which is more or less an alternative reserve currency, the way the BRICS look at it.
Yeah.
But they're not buying treasuries anymore. And it's the people trying to leave the system right now that are maybe inadvertently supporting the legacy system in and of itself by all of the support for treasuries backing the stable coins that, you know, USDT and Bitcoin are the primary trading pair on all of the exchanges. When people go out or into, very often they will, instead of going back into the ecosystem, back into dollars, they'll stay in USDT, which is fully backed by US Treasuries. So look, I don't know how it all plays out, but I am all but convinced the only way that you ever get a system to work is to have some sound money attached to it.
Right.
And when you see that the Treasury Secretary say it's its largest holding, when you see Judy Shelton making the rounds and will most likely be part of the Federal Reserve, when you see that Trump understands the whole concept of bankruptcy and you know, redoing the system, I think it would this time. And one other point, you look at the redistribution of gold amongst the European central banks. The guy that writes for Money Metals, I forgot his name, Neuenhuis, I think. He's done a really amazing job. In fact, the Federal Reserve talked about this a long time ago. It's on their website about redistribution of gold amongst the countries in order to roll out a gold standard. And if you look at gold in relation to GDP across the whole Western European ecosystem, almost every country has the exact same amount. They've been redistributing it. You know, I think they are all preparing for some sort of a gold revaluation. The question is, does it revalue all at once? Or do they just let it continue to go up 3 steps back to up 3 back to?
Well, that brings me to my next question with respect, again, to some of the older interviews with Jim Sinclair. He was saying, in his opinion, and we can get yours opinion on this, that there would be a human reset or a human policy-backed reset, and then there would be a market reset, right? So let's talk about that. If these gold revaluation funds right now are in human terms and in policymaker terms talking about this 40% somehow and this redistribution as you're talking, that would be the human counterpart of this reset, which presumably would be rejected here if you look at his scenario and if you look at the WebBot data scenario. But if you look at the market reset, here's one example here of a case for $45,000 gold. As stocks crash and gold rises, the Dow gold ratio will collapse. And here on the chart, we're looking at some projections for gold in this market reset as opposed to the human and policy driven reset. What do you make of this gold Dow ratio, and could that be taking into account here with respect to this 1, 2, and 3 resets that we've been forecasting, Andy?
Yeah, sure, 1 to 1. And last time we saw it was 1980, I believe, at $850. Yeah, why not?
Right.
And you know, I think that you could argue, you can see how the reset would work, where the Federal Reserve wants lower interest rates, and they've lowered the front end of the yield curve by 75 basis points in the last 2 meetings, 0.75%. Yet the back end of the market is going the other direction. It's gone up by almost 100 basis points. It's gone up by 1% as the other side of the market has gone down by 0.75%. So it's a situation where the market has far more power than does the Federal Reserve in the end. And so the man-made side of things, no matter how much we want it, the power of the market in and of itself is far more substantial than the ability of the Federal Reserve to control it. So yeah, maybe they usher in this man-made reset. Maybe that's what Trump is doing with threatening the tariffs and sanctions and doing the things by lowering interest rates and making the dollar weaker. And why would you want to sell your currency or your commodities for a weak dollar, and incentivizing these countries to no longer embrace the dollar system? Maybe that is the seeds of the reset. While then at the exact same time, when the market does reset, you come back in with the only other tier one reserve asset in the world that all of the central banks have been buying and tie it to your new system. Maybe that is the Mother Nature reset. So maybe the first reset doesn't include gold, is what I'm getting at. And
maybe it's this tariff suggested right now that is the first reset to fail, basically.
Yes. And then the second reset comes in and issues gold. And you got guys like James Rickards, who says it will go to $27,000 and takes M1 and divides it by the price of gold. And there are other ways of coming to much higher numbers as well. Look, Bitcoin's $100,000. I remember when Andy Hoffman, who used to work for me, told me to buy it at $400. Who in the hell would ever thought it would go to $100,000? Well, evidently he did, and others. So why is it beyond the scope of imagination in an asset that has been massively manipulated for a very long time in order to support the illusion of the bond market strength, of the dollar strength, of the Western market strength? Why is it so hard to see it revalued to a level that would support a new system higher than anyone thinks possible? And you mentioned Jim Sinclair. He said it would reach those numbers that people would think would be impossible. I think his number way back when was $10,000. Of course, the debt problem wasn't as big as
no. He came in on an interview quite after that, after some of this monetary printing, and he had redone the math, and I think he was at 87,000 or 97,000 per ounce for gold. Anyway,
well, there you go.
Back of the net.
The premise was that it would never come back down because it would be pegged to a new system. So, JC, after everything we've lived through in the last 4 years, anything is possible to me, and it does make sense. It makes sense to me because the most powerful, well-informed players in the world have been buying gold hand over fist, and they haven't stopped since Trump's been elected. It's increasing. Right. And why would the most powerful bank in the world reclassify gold as the only other tier one reserve asset? Mm-hmm. I mean, all of these things make sense to me when you look at it from the long game. Maybe this is the first reset we find ourselves in the midst of right now. And maybe that's why Trump is doing what he's doing, to incentivize and abandoning the system. I'm going to threaten
Can I get you into the woo just a little bit here too, Andy? Sure. I saw this article on the BRICS News the other day. China discovers 83 billion gold reserve. They're talking about these two new veins under the ground. And when I saw that, I'm like, my head wants to go to, why now? Did they just discover? Right? Was this an old discovery they were holding back in their back pocket to when suddenly we were going to get to this gold reset to be able to play at the table with perhaps even more gold than was expected as a decision-making process? At the same time, in the month of September, China was busted here for buying 60 tons of gold. So something seems to be happening behind the scenes. They seem to be putting gold that was off books back onto the books somehow. I think perhaps there's some weird stuff about that announcement. What did you make of that?
Well, let me answer it a little bit long way, but I think and I agree with you. My head went there too. And again, there's a blurred line, if you've been doing this long enough, between what is reality and what is conspiracy.
Yeah.
My whole career, people said, including Jim Sinclair, that the Chinese are lying about their gold holdings. They stayed at 1,200 metric tons forever for a long period of time. Now, our mutual friend Billy Holter will tell you that they've been mining between 300 and 500 metric tons a year for over 25 years. Those numbers alone put them higher than what we supposedly have. They are, we know, the largest producers in the world of gold, second largest producers of silver in the world, yet they are flying around the world buying concentrate and doré. So here's number one. Concentrate and doré both are, concentrate is a byproduct of the mining, and the doré is a crudely refined bar. Now, the rules say that if the gold that is accumulated by a central bank is under 999 purity, it doesn't have to be reported. Well, none of that is being reported, and it disintermediates the market. So there's no increase in the price from their massive offtake of going directly to the miners, paying double what the West will, and sending it home to refine it. When the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, buys gold, and they probably have as much or more than the PBOC, they don't need to report it to the IMF. When gold is purchased by a proxy, by a commercial bank on behalf of the PBOC, that ain't reported either. And so you have a country that is the largest producer, is buying concentrate in dollar, has the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, buying it hand over fist, and proxy banks. None of that's being reported. They tell us, yeah, we stopped for a while, but the import-export numbers show a different story, tell a different story. And this is exactly what you're talking about here. So my thought was, you know, Alistair McLeod 2 years ago said that by his numbers, they have 38,000 metric tons, 20 by the state, 18 by the people. And if things got bad enough, they would take it from the people and pay them for it or whatever they would do. So, you know, he's saying they have 40,000 metric tons. Well, maybe that is true. And it would probably be a lot more right now. And how do you tell the world, yeah, we've been lying forever? Well, I know. How about we say we found the largest gold find ever?
Yeah.
And
please.
Yes. And in a few years, you just say, well, here it is. Here's all our gold. We've been exploiting this reserve for a while now, and it's manifested into 25,000 metric tons. There you go. Right. And could that be the case? I don't know. And if not, then everything I just said to you, plus the world's largest gold find, only cements their role in, you know, he who has the gold makes the rules type of environment.
Yeah. Okay. So the counterpart of that, there was a question in the chat here about my interview yesterday with Jim Willey. Let me see if I can bring this up on for you guys. In this interview, Jim is suggesting that maybe the Trump administration has access to already pre-mined gold that is off ledger somewhere in the Philippines. So again, now we're going even deeper into the woo. But if China is bringing up now some off ledger books back onto the ledger here, presumably ahead of some type of reset or world negotiation, what do the states have in their back pocket? Are we looking at the Philippines? Are we looking at the Grand Canyon, as perhaps a Big Square is talking about? Do we even have the gold to compete at that level? Where do we stand today, in your opinion, Andy?
Well, it lends itself to speculation. Fort Knox hasn't been audited in 70 years, even through the repetitive attempts by Ron Paul to audit. Fort Knox turned it down every time. Where did Saddam Hussein's gold go? Where did Gaddafi's gold go? Where did the 12 billion worth of gold the Ukraine sold to fund the war? Where did that go?
Where did the gold go in the Bank of Canada vaults that 4 or 5 different countries are telling us they're still holding there, even though it was emptied 10 years ago? We don't know, Andy. I'll show you that.
Right. Well, and just as people give China crap for not being truthful, well, we're not being truthful either. And if indeed the plan is to go to a gold-backed system in a few years or whenever that may be, well, you certainly wouldn't want to tell countries how massive you are in your pursuit of gold. And look, you know, quite frankly, if I were advising the Federal Reserve, I'd say, look, this is how we lose the battle, and the BRICS nations are going to beat us by having the gold. And I'd start front running it and just tell the Federal Reserve to start massively buying gold. Why haven't we been active in the gold market? All of these things lend themselves to questions, or have we been and just not been telling anyone? I don't know, but
right.
It wouldn't surprise me if they had it somewhere else, or as Vic says, you know, come up with it and that they've had it in the Grand Canyon or wherever it is. I think if they understand the reset is coming now, you know, Trump came out not too long ago and said we don't have any gold. And is that true? I don't know. All I can tell you is that it's strange that all of the central banks around the world are buying it, and Canada and the U.S. are not, at least.
Right. This was you and I missed a couple of shows here, but this was the article. I talked to David Morgan about this too. We were trying to decode where perhaps this gold went, so you guys can go and watch that episode. Let me move into, you mentioned depression earlier, so let me change the slide decks here for you guys. I want you to hear a clip. And this is our Deputy Prime Minister here in Canada. Hold on, let me see if I can bring this up on the screen for you guys. talking about a vibe session. Now, I studied economics in university, and nobody ever taught me about a vibe session, Andy. So let's hear what our Deputy Prime Minister has to say here, and then we'll look at some of the news in the aftermath of this particular clip here. And this was from November 25.
The disconnect between the positive news that the numbers are showing about the Canadian economy and what people are feeling. He talked about how Canadians are feeling. And that's a really important economic point. A lot of economists have been talking about the vibe session and the fact that Canadians just aren't feeling good and that is having real economic consequences. And the Canadian economists making that point are right, that there is a disconnect between the real economic, the really positive economic news, the fact that the Canadian economy does appear set for a soft landing. That's good news, but Canadians aren't feeling it, and that is shaping their economic behavior in ways that are not great for the Canadian economy. People have been talking about a vibe session.
So essentially, it's the Canadians' fault here because they're not vibing correctly with the positive numbers on the economy. Andy, check this out. So BNN, Bloomberg, just after that, Bank of Canada unlikely to cease rate cuts amid a trade risk. Of course, if you're cutting rates, is because the economy is not doing well, of course. And now here, just in the last couple of days, the ex-governor of the Bank of Canada, Stephen Pallot, says, no, we're already in the recession. They're using the R word, Andy. I thought that was absolute bullshit. It's gaslighting to the nth degree, but it suggests that maybe we're inching towards the realization that we're going the depression route that you just talked about here, not just here in Canada, but also in the States. And we're seeing some of these actors now actually using the correct language as opposed to the gaslighting of the vibe session. What did you make of that whole?
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind when she was talking was bullshit. It's funny you say that, and it's true. But they do the same thing here with lying about all of the statistics on inflation, on unemployment, on job creation, on all of these things. It's all a big lie. And you know, they talk about a great economy. Like look at the Biden administration, who talked about how great the labor market was and how strong the economy was, yet they revised at the end of the year over 880,000 jobs down that never were created, and during the year over 250,000. So 1 million plus of the jobs that they were talking about never happened, and the growth that they talk about gets revised downward, never happened. And inflation, they give us inflation numbers which omit food, housing, and energy. And when things like coffee go up 80% year over year, in April they replace it with tea. So everything is a lie. And you know, while we're on that subject about governments that lie, I just want to read one thing to you. I know it's not what you asked me, but it kind of hits the nail on the head. You know, we talk about President Biden pardoning his son. Now, as a father of 3 kids, one of which is a son, I get it. You know, you don't want your kid to go away, but he lied about it, and he could have pardoned Trump at the same time, and say, you know, this stops now. This you know, this weaponizing of the Justice Department or whatever, it stops now, and we're gonna clean the slate. He didn't do that. He lied, and he's an idiot for doing so. But it just makes me feel that everything was a lie. And I want to read to you something that I think, well, you decide for yourself. It just tells me that everything that these officials are telling us in the United States and in Canada are a lie.
Before you read your statement, yes. It's not just Hunter Biden. They're presumably now preemptively also going to pardon Anthony Fauci, Adam Schiff, Liz Cheney, and perhaps even more. Like, if that doesn't make your blood boil, I don't know what is. But okay, let's read
it does
now.
And everything is a lie. And this is why there's euphoria around Trump, that hopefully we get back to truth and transparency and the American ideals. But this is this idiot Lindsey Graham talking to Sean Hannity just the other night on Sean Hannity's show. And he has the nerve to say the following. He says, let me start at the beginning here. He says, the war in the Ukraine is all about money. Graham told Fox News host Sean Hannity, and that the U.S. stands to financially gain from Ukraine's vast agricultural sector and $2 to $7 trillion worth of rare earth minerals alike in a prospective wartime deal with the war-torn, albeit resource-wealthy nation. This war is all about money. People don't talk about it, but you know, the richest country in all of Europe for rare earth minerals is Ukraine. $2 to $7 trillion worth of minerals that are rare earth minerals, very relevant to the 21st century, Graham declared. Ukraine's ready to do a deal with us, not the Russians, so it's in our interest to make sure that Russia doesn't take over the place. Ukraine is the breadbasket of the developing world, Graham said. 50% of all the food going to Africa comes from the Ukraine. Graham also emphasized that the incoming Trump administration is uniquely positioned to cash out on such resources. Cash out. Donald Trump is going to do a deal and get our money back. I mean, you could puke hearing that, to enrich ourselves with rare earth minerals. A good deal for the Ukraine and us, Graham said, and he's going to bring peace. So let me get this right. Just like we went into Iraq under the false pretenses of looking for weapons of mass destruction, destroy their country, kill millions of their citizens, topple their regime, and guess what? We're still there, and we have our thumb on their natural resources and their thumb on Iran. So what did we just do here? We go, in essence, a proxy war, give $200 billion to the Ukraine, Stinger missiles, F-16 jets, just another $175 million, all in the name of Ukrainian sovereignty. Bullshit. We've killed millions of their men. We've blown up their entire country, destroyed it, and who benefited? Well, the military-industrial complex sure benefited. And who's going to rebuild it? Who's buying up all of that land and is going to rebuild it? Well, that'd be BlackRock. They're pretty much the military-industrial complex. And so does this sound like a good deal? And not only that, we're going to take their rare earths, for payment. So we're enriched. And then we're enriched again by rebuilding it, first by blowing it up, then rebuilding it, killing all of those people, has nothing to do with the sovereignty of this country, and then pillaging their natural resources. So when the United States talks about, and I am a patriot, let me just make that clear. I love this country, but our politicians and the current administration are a bunch of idiots. And to do this and to say this publicly, it just reinforces everything that we've heard over the last 4 years. It's all been a lie, from the pandemic to the vaccine to the lockdowns to everything, and including all of the lies that the Biden administration has told us, and now about the war that has bankrupted this country, destroyed another, all in the name of enriching the military-industrial complex and companies like BlackRock, who will stand to benefit from the rebuilding of the Ukraine. None of it for the stated goal of Ukrainian sovereignty, and more for our own national interests. It's deplorable. And when you see all of these lies, just like that lady from the Canadian Parliament was talking about, the West has been, I think, they've been uncovered as being pathological liars that are only trying to enrich themselves, and they could care less about the American population. They could care less about the Ukrainian population. And I think you have to realize that. And this is what is going to precipitate the reset. We have lost, people have lost faith, countries have lost faith in us. We've lost our goodwill. We've lost trust. We've destroyed the reserve currency and almost destroyed this country. And by the grace of God, hopefully Trump comes in and is able to at least get the culture back. But in terms of getting over the debt issue, over that Rubicon, I would argue that ship has sailed. And maybe we're in the middle, like I said, of this first reset. We've pissed off the world already so badly, and now we're threatening to take our dollar, which has been eviscerated through inflation, or else, I don't know. I wonder how that all plays out. I guess we'll find out.
I guess we'll find out too. Guys, if you want to hear more about those resets, if you go to Cliff's Substack and you look at this particular post from 2 days ago, Trump's fucks up. He's talking about these 3 resets here on the screen. He has a different take on it, of course, and he's leading into this new technology being deployed or at least released into the grand public here that could affect how these financial resets are going to go moving forward. So I thought it was interesting. If you haven't seen that article, please do go check it out. Now, before we end the show, Andy, I want to finish with this. Warren Buffett, this is a post from Fortune here on November 25, issues a warning for all parents ahead of the 84 trillion Great Wealth Reset. Seems to be using a lot of language that we've been using for a number of years. What do you think he's at with this particular comment here, Andy?
I don't know. That's actually kind of intriguing. Why is he warning parents? What am I missing? Did you read the article? I haven't seen that.
No, and I don't know why the parent stuff was in there either, but let's take it at face value that there's a huge reset coming, and he seems to be a warning of it here moving forward. Like you've been espousing that same sentiment for quite some time, but what do you think?
You know, again, that's something that's really piqued my interest. I can't imagine what he means by.
He's still saying here, Warren Buffett, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, says that avoiding uncomfortable topics can hurt families. I've eaten shit all week for having uncomfortable conversations about where this financial system is going. Everybody wants to believe in external myth saviors, and yet we're seeing more and more people come out and say, hey, we need to have serious conversations here. There might be some unintended consequences here as we move forward. And like you, I think many of the contributors who are seriously and not beholden to any political party or to any ideal are having conversations about, yeah, we could maybe get our country back, our values back, maybe a little hint of justice, although in the last couple of days with the pardons, it doesn't seem to be going in that direction. But on the financial front, we have a lot of things to discuss here that are just not being talked about yet. And it appears that the first salvos in solving the financial system seems to be aggravating it more than anything else. So,
well, you know, he's 90 years old or whatever. Maybe he means his children or people our age. I don't know. I mean, I did the interview this morning, as I mentioned, with Francis Hunt, and he basically said that the legacy system is the target. Get out of the legacy system. Get out of stocks. Get out of bonds. Get out of banks. He said the new 60-40 would be 60% crypto, 40% gold, and then at some point, not too far down the road, that would switch to 60% gold and silver, 40% crypto. But that the target of, you know, and this was in relation to who's pulling the strings ahead of Trump. You know, he said, you know, Trump was ushered into this environment to bring in the tokenization and the surveillance system. Well, I said, you mean there's people pulling the strings ahead of Trump? Absolutely. We'll never see their faces. We'll never know their names, but they are. You know, maybe he's basically saying you need to get out of the system. And you ask yourself, why is he so loaded up on cash? It's interesting. Where is he? He's almost entirely in very, very, very short-term treasuries. So, you know, I think he's saying the legacy system perhaps is the target, the banks, the stock market, and ultimately the bond market. But
let's read what he was saying also here to add context why he was talking about the family. He was talking about will planning or estate planning. So planning your will could make or break your family after your death, warns Berkshire Hathaway CEO and legendary advisor Warren Buffett. Father Time always wins, but he can be fickle. The 94-year-old billionaire noted the unusually candid letter released on Monday. Conversations addressing one's own death can be a difficult subject to broach. The logistics of what happens to our money and our belongings can be equally a dreaded task. But ahead of the $84 trillion great wealth transfer, Buffett asserts that there is no sense in delaying the uncomfortable and risking future conflicts down the line. So he's talking about future risks here to wealth and having a better sense of planning right now. But he's alluding to this great wealth transfer being an instigator for having these uncomfortable conversations right now, basically.
yeah, where is
Talking about estate planning, but it goes for the conversation of the audience here as well today. Go ahead.
Right. And maybe he's saying that wealth transfer is in danger, is the only thing that I can really take from that. Warning your kids and worrying about the wealth transfer, that the wealth transfer is in danger, that the legacy system is the target. I mean, I don't know what else he could mean by that. If he's warning to warn your children and be wary of the wealth transfer in the new system, it sounds to me like a reset. It sounds to me like the rug pull, so to speak.
Okay, so I apologize for this segment too. It's a little bit convoluted to me, but I'm just following down the track here, and it was pointing to this other article from August 9, 2024, where the great wealth transfer is set to be $90 trillion, as opposed to 84, a disappointment, especially for millennials. So I'm thinking what he means is the money that's going from the baby boomers to this next
Right.
generation is at risk here. That's what he was warning.
Right. And it's the legacy system that
Yeah.
whereby, and ask yourself, why would the greatest value investor of all time be almost entirely in cash? He doesn't trust the system. He doesn't trust the market. And maybe that's what he's alluding to. He's alluding to a rug pull. I don't know. If you think about it for a moment, where's all the money right now? Well, you got record $7+ trillion in money markets. You got trillions of dollars in the stock market in a handful of stocks.
Yeah.
And you got them all in crypto. Now you want to pull the rug. It's not as hard to do when they're in three massive groupings. And if there really is a deep state that's fighting Trump and is going to push back, well, the way to do it is to let him get established, and then sometime spring or summer, pull the rug and blame it on him and his radical agenda, and let the whole thing go pear-shaped. Maybe
Well,
that's
now they're talking about 10 new viruses that are unknown to man, hitting people, 170 deaths, blah blah blah. It seems to be they're pushing this new COVID scenario 2.0 here, just moving forward. Just in the last 48 hours, they're pushing that too, Andy. So
that's there's the economic ninja buddy of mine was talking. I think it's called Marburg disease. He was talking about, and it's very, very lethal. And look, it wouldn't be so beyond imagination to see that happen. And they're not going to go down without a fight.
no.
And maybe indeed, if he really is trying to get rid of the deep state, and look, he's going after the CIA and their disinformation and their censorship. He's going after the military industrial complex, trying to end these wars. He's going after the deep state. He's got a target on him.
For sure.
So
And Putin came out last week and said his life is perhaps more in danger now than it was before the election. So again, Putin was referring to some intelligence gathering. It was funny that Tucker Carlson is going back to Russia here, presumably again, to have this other interview with Putin. Who knows what 2.0 of this interview can bring out into the open. Andy, before we go here today, I wanted to bring this up. We had
JC, someone says Andy is not woo. I wouldn't say I'm not. I'd say I am more open-minded than most people I know.
For sure.
And I think the definition of someone who, and I'm not saying I'm intelligent, but I think people aren't intelligent if they're not able to embrace other ideas, or you learn more and more about less and less till you know everything about nothing. I would say that I am very much inclined to the woo. Whether or not I can articulate it, there is much, much more. And I acknowledge there is much, much more that we don't understand, that I don't understand behind the scenes. So I don't know if that's a fair classification. I'm just not as informed on it, but spiritual, and I am. And
I wouldn't agree with the comment either, Andy. I've known you to be very open to different scenarios. I also know you to be a realist, and perhaps some of the woo crowd need a little bit of dose of realism here also, because there's ideals and aspirations, but there's also the reality of the current system and the way it's broken, and how a lot of people are not talking about the solutions on how to fix it. They're talking about this ideal further down the road, which is idealistic and positive and great for humanity, but nobody can really explain that how do we go from here to there without having all of these unintended consequences. And that's where I think having a little bit of realism and all of that is very important. And I appreciate all of your contributions, Andy, to the show.
I love you, JC. Do me a favor. Let me just ask you a really stupid question, man.
Okay.
In one sentence or a couple, what is the woo to you?
The woo is what cannot be named. So basically, everything that we don't know that is surrounding our reality. And the more we discuss the what cannot be named, it's no longer woo. It's here in our reality, right? So it's all of these external forces that put pressure on our reality that are yet unbeknownst to us until we name them and actually discuss them.
Yeah, well, that demystifies it a lot, and I believe that. And I mean, that's
and in
cool.
a way, you're very much woo, because it's actually very, very encouraging to see a person of your nature from your industry talking about all of these conspiracy theories about what countries are doing and not doing with their gold and all of these holdings, and trying to extrapolate where all of these plans are going. That's very much woo. It's looking at the conspiracies behind these world. And the more we realize it, and Andy will be one of the first here to put on the map of being recognized for it, is that he's called a lot of shots for the last 10 years and people thought you were stupid. Yet time and time again, a lot of things you're talking about is now mainstream. So you went from the woo talking about stuff that could not be named 10 years ago, naming them. And now here we are with a lot of those things under your belt and into our reality, Andy. So,
can I tell you one more story?
Sure.
I believed in the woo for a long time, since I was a little kid. So my mom and dad tell a story, and my parents have never lied to me in my life, not that I know of, and they're very open. We have a very open relationship. And my parents were in New York, and they saw a psychic, a palm reader, a psychic named Daryl Jason. And in my life, I've never seen my parents really argue ever. I've never heard my mother raise her voice. Never, not once. And I'm 54 years old. And my parents tell a story. And when my mom tells a story, I swear to God, chills come on her arms. You can see it. And she says to me, we saw this lady named Daryl Jason in New York City in like 1970, whatever, 5. And I connected with this lady. She said, well, fast forward about 3-4 years later, my mom would say, your father and I got into the biggest fight we've ever had in our lives in the middle of the night. And the phone rings. And my dad answers the phone, and he stands by this. He says, Andy, honest to God, it happened just like your mom said. And it's a collect call from Daryl Jason, who they hadn't seen in 3 or 4 years. Now, right now, my mom's arms would be covered in chills. And hello, this is a collect call from Daryl Jason. Will you accept? Yes. Knock that shit off right now. You two are meant to be together. Knock that shit off. I'm telling you right now, stop it. Click. She hangs up the phone. The only time, that was the last time they ever spoke with Daryl Jason. And when my parents tell me the story, they look at me in the face like with a steel, I'm dead serious look. I've had no reason to ever disbelieve it. And I have understood that the world is a whole hell of a lot bigger than us all since I was a little kid. So for what it's worth, I'm on your side, man. And I'm always, always open to learning more and realizing that, you know, in the end, I don't know a whole lot, but I'm always trying to learn more. So
that, and we don't know what we don't know,
man. And I love coming on your show, and I love taking part in this, and I can't wait to come and see everyone in Ottawa very soon. So yeah, man, thanks for letting me be a part of it, for real.
I'm excited to have you in Ottawa. Folks, please do join us for the Woo Beginning Conference here on March 14, 15, and 16. Of course, Andy is going to be one of our keynote speakers, Penny Kelly. There's another one there that is not announced but confirmed. So this keeps on growing. So please check it out at beyondmystic.net/conference. And before we go, Andy, also, we just ran this special the last couple of weeks. People are still asking about junk silver here.
Yep, we'll keep it going as long as I can. Yep, it's the best value in silver, hands down, not even close.
I love your commercial you produced for us yesterday with the fighting the blue chickens episode with Cliff-I.
My wife said to me, Andy,
natural at that.
I'm not exactly sure what blue chickens are, but we'll go with it. I'm going to have to understand a little bit of the woo and blue chicken theory, but I'll check that out.
It was a good show. All right, thanks for being here, Andy. I love you, man.
We'll see you best, JC. And you, by the way, to everyone out there, happy holidays. I know I'll see you probably one more time before the new year and Christmas and all, but yeah, I'll just take the chance to say happy, healthy holidays and new year, and look forward to picking up where we left off, my man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. And folks, please join us again here at 8 o'clock Eastern tonight for the next edition of the Breaking Moves Beyond the News episode. I'm Jean-Claude Beyond Mystic. I love you guys, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.